Onto this worrying conversation now. Rights group Open Secrets has implicated the South African National Defence Force's 4 units. And the claims here are that of torture, murder, dating back to 2019. The organization saying it has on good authority, perhaps I should say, that the implicated SANDF members are stealing weapons and are using them to commit crime. Let's get more detail on this now, and we speak to the director at Open Secrets, Hennie van Vuuren, who joins us from the Western Cape this morning. Hennie, good morning to you, and thank you very much for your time. The retort is going to be that if Open Secrets is making such alarming claims, then they've got to table evidence. What evidence do you have?
Yes, good morning, Paulie. Indeed, it is about evidence. Open Secrets has published 2 in-depth pieces, both yesterday and today in the Daily Maverick, which is part of a series we've been investigating called The Russian Doll. And we had really started looking at the murder of a police officer, Frans Matipa, who was a member of the Hawks. He was assassinated in August of this year, and we were looking at the matters Matipa was investigating, particularly the activities of a special forces unit who were linked to both an abduction at the end of last year in Gauteng and the Mall of Africa, and before that they were spotted alongside the mysterious shipment that was loaded on and off the Lady R. So we were looking at the special forces unit, which is the elite unit within the military, and their activities. And then, Ollie, what happened is we were approached by whistleblowers, by people who have actual evidence. And as a civil society organization that undertakes in-depth investigations, we took the time to consider the evidence, to verify it as much as possible. And what they told was a different tale of abuse, which linked that special forces unit and other units within the military, including senior military officials, and one of those is the Chief of the Army, General Mbata, amongst others, to a series of events linked to torture of individuals. So if I can just paint the picture briefly, what happened was in late 2019, rifles were stolen, indeed, from the SANDF tech base in Littleton, which is just south of Pretoria, close to Tabatswane military base. Those rifles should obviously not get in the wrong hands. They're dangerous weapons. And the SANDF really did what they were required to do, started a military police investigations to locate the 18 stolen rifles. But where they crossed the line, that instead of, when they thought that there were people that were alleged to have stolen the rifles who were civilians, instead of handing that matter over to the police, the military, as we have shown, went outside of the military bases and started operating in civilian territory. Now, that is very dangerous. It is criminal and it's unconstitutional. And we've been able to show in different instances, one of those I'll mention briefly, was in one instance at least, where a convoy, including supported by defense intelligence, military police involved, and led by a group of special forces operatives, went out in the dead of night into the East Rand, abducted a civilian at a McDonald's in Kempton Park, a man we only know as Spamandla. And according to our sources who were there present, and this was corroborated by 2 further sources who have insight into this at the time, brought back to Tabatswane military base, to the Tabatswane military police bar. And there the man called Spamandla was tortured throughout the night till his body turned green from the bruises. He was waterboarded. It was all the most violent torture that this person was put through, from what we understand. He couldn't see eventually. And he then finally took his last breath. He took one sip of a drink. They offered him a beer, and he died. And we are told that Special Forces said, this is one particular Special Forces commander who was leading this, a Colonel Sunnyboy Piniwambi, according to our sources, had said that they would take his mortal remains, his body, and bury it 4 kilometers away at Special Forces headquarters in Spescorp, which is close to Tabatswane. And that seems only to be the beginning of a tale of torture involving the SANDF, and we've published further details today about this.
Hennie, you've said quite a mouthful, and there are a number of areas I'm going to ask us to revisit. In the piece, in the Daily Maverick, that you speak about that has been published, you say that This is a story that explores a crime that took place some 3 years before the Lady R incident. So this is exactly the same story that you are retelling. Am I correct?
That's correct. And so this is, it's really just to explain the issue of the rifles that predates the Lady R. It has no direct link, but rather, if you like, Polly, the golden thread that weaves its way through the story is the involvement of special forces units, allegedly in the torture of and the murder of this particular person, Spamandla, we've spoken about, as well as other individuals that we have, at least one other individual who we have spoken to, and of course, as I said, have been involved in other activity that, at the very least, should raise the interest of politicians and others, including the abduction of someone at the Mall of Africa. So it is an investigation into these elite units and how they operate, and whether they operate with the okay, if you like, with the approval of the seniors within the military as well.
A broad criminal network within the SANDF perhaps is a way to sum up what you have painted here, Hennie. The rifles that have been stolen from this military base, you're saying that these are rifles. The assumption is that these are high-powered weapons. Do we know how many were stolen and whether indeed they have subsequently been used in the commission of these crimes?
Yeah, so there were 18 rifles that were stolen, Polly, and just to be clear, they were never used in the commission of they weren't used in these crimes at all. The crime, if you like, we are reporting was the hunt to find the people who had stolen the rifles. And there were there were a number of members of the SANDF who were arrested in this was December 2019. The media reported on it. We know that ultimately 2 particular members of the SANDF amongst the larger group were charged. One of those members has, we believe, since gone AWOL. We have not been able to find them or to locate them. But we believe they were used in a way to lure the people back in who they might have sold the weapons to. So they sold those weapons to, or gave the weapons to people who themselves might have been involved in criminal activity. And what the military was doing was going out to try and retrieve these stolen weapons. But, when viewers think about this, what might come to mind, Polly, is that, look, these are bad people, and bad people have stolen weapons, and they may deserve what's coming to them. But that's not the way it works, because nobody knows if these were, in fact, the people that stole the weapons. We know that many of the people that were tortured, and at least one person we have reported on today who have been caught up in the same dragnet, a man by the name of Pule and Komo, they claim they knew nothing about the theft of those weapons. In fact, these were suspects that were being picked up and tortured. And that's what happens when you have, I guess, what we would describe as an extrajudicial process, very much like that worked during apartheid. Yeah. Nothing comes through the courts, where military people make decisions on their own, and civilians will get caught up in that horrid crossfire. We fear this is exactly what's happened here, where, if you like, justice has gone AWOL and the military are making decisions all on their own.
Yeah, it reminds us definitely of those military death squads that operated with impunity in that era of apartheid. So connect for us, Hennie, the Hawks investigator, that person's death in relation to the people that you are saying that they were hunted on the back of them having allegedly stolen these weapons from the military.
We know in one particular instance, the one I described with a man who was hunted down in the East Rand and taken in for interrogation, a man by the name of Spamandla, that the chief interrogator was a man, allegedly, we are told by people who were on the scene, a man by the name of Lieutenant Colonel Sunnyboy Pini Wambi. Now, Wambi was one of the prime targets, if you like, one of the prime suspects for the late Lieutenant Colonel Frans Matipa from the Hawks. He had been investigating an abduction of civilians from the Mall of Africa in late December last year. Wambi and his colleagues from Special Forces were on the scene and literally passed this man who was abducted, Abadela Abadiga, and his bodyguard within minutes. The Special Forces maintained that they were there simply to undertake a routine training exercise in the middle of the day in the mall. But, many things point towards the possibility that special forces led that operation to abduct this Abadega. And, when we were speaking to our various sources, we managed to piece together that the man, as I said, who was leading the torture exercise in 2020 looking for these stolen rifles was the same man who was involved from special forces in the abduction at the end of last year. So what we see is special forces in different spaces, in different places where crimes are taking place. Those crimes are against civilians. The military, Polly, cannot operate outside of a military base without the authorization of the President and Parliament. Those are laws we passed precisely and enshrined in the Constitution because during apartheid the military were on the streets, and we don't want a repetition of that kind of practice. What we are seeing now, if these allegations are correct, is a kind of activity where structurally there's a paramilitary effectively that's operating. They are a law unto themselves. And our concern is, let us not be fooled, like during apartheid when arguments were made that there are actors called third force, like de Klerk and others would say they have no control over. And there are generals and other people in hierarchical environments like the military who are in charge. And the question is, which of the generals knew? We certainly are seeing the fingerprints of some of them on these activities. We are making the point is that this is not just a small group of actors. There is a problem within the military. There's a problem in the military that might very well go right to the top. And that requires the intervention of the commander-in-chief. And that is only one person in this country, Polly, and that's President Cyril Ramaphosa.
As you use this phrase, Hennie, let's then conclude the conversation with that one fingerprint, perhaps. You've mentioned a General Mbata. This is a senior army officer that you are saying is allegedly involved in this. If we go higher up the military rank, there is the man who supersedes all of them, and that is General Ruzani Mapwanya. Have you and your team that are investigating this reported this to that General Ruzani Mapwanya, and what has the response been?
Yeah, Polly, just to point out that General Mbata, who we refer to, is the current chief of the army. So he is really what you call top brass. Another man who was close to the time of at least one of the tortures of a man by the name of Pulia Nkomo, according to him, is a Rear Admiral Mapoto. The Rear Admiral is the head of military police. I'm not saying they were directly involved. Mbata, in any event, is, according to our sources, had said that he actually gave direction. He said things like the forces must squeeze the balls, excuse that language, on your show of the operatives. That's what they must do. But it truly was brutal what was done to some of these individuals. Now, what we do know is that the chief of the SANDF, we have certainly asked some questions of the chief of the SANDF. We've put questions around some of these activities to the Minister of Police. But, Ollie, let me draw your attention to one thing, is that some of the very brave officials within the military, we understand, had drawn the attention of the military and the chief of the SANDF to widespread abuse, including corruption, PPE corruption, but also these issues. We're speaking about torture. And a commission of inquiry, if you like, a board of inquiry, and the military operates in its own way, has its own rules, was set up, headed by a Brigadier General Moorhouse. That Brigadier General and his committee board of inquiry considered this evidence, we are told. We are told they heard from dozens of witnesses over a number of days, and he filed a report. That report, we understand, has the Moorhouse report, as it's called, which would shine a light on many of these things, has been sitting on the desk of the chief of the SANDF for at least 6 months. The question is, if it contains uncomfortable truths, why is it not being made public? Why is the Portfolio Committee in Parliament not being given this? And frankly, why is the general public not given access to this information? Because there seems to be a structural problem in the military, a big problem. That must be resolved. It cannot be resolved in a closed manner between a band of brothers who look after each other. The public needs to be involved, and the politicians need to be involved in this in an open manner. So we are saying release the Moorhouse inquiry report, make that the beginning of a process of weeding out the abusers and possibly the corrupt and others within the military, and make sure that we have a military that serves the interests of the South African public and serves the interests of our constitutional democracy. That is our target. This is not a target at the SANDF as such. There are brave officers within the SANDF who are there to serve the public. It's those people who must be given a chance to do their jobs, and certainly those who are undermining the SANDF and the Constitution must be held to account.
Hennie van Vuuren, what explosive claims or explosive information that you have given us here, and a number of people being mentioned, and so it's only correct for us to perhaps extend that right of reply to all of the people that have been mentioned in this interview, for them to come through and tell us what it is that they know and refute the claims, if indeed that is...
Holly, may I make one brief point just
Sure.
to say we did in fact give everyone that I've named in this interview with you, before we published 2 articles yesterday and today in the Daily Maverick, and I encourage viewers to read those, we did give all of the implicated parties an opportunity to respond. I just wish to add, we received no response. I have received a brief message from Mr. Dlamini, who's the spokesperson for the Department of Defense, to say we will respond to everything once we've had an opportunity to review all the information you present. So it's very important that these questions are asked of the office holders so that they do in fact give an account of their side of the story, and we as the public fundamentally have a right to know.
Hennie van Vuuren, thank you so much once again for this information and for coming on. Gee whiz, the army, with all its problems in South Africa, can they really afford something so explosive like this? Well, he has spoken about the commander-in-chief of the armed forces in South Africa, and that's the president. Ultimately, that's who we're going to have to seek answers from. Hennie van Vuuren, a director at Open Secrets. This is a rights group.